Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way post-match reaction to Lazio 2, Celtic 0. Celtic are now officially out of Europe after just 5 games in the Champions League this season. My name is Ryan McGinlay, and as always, win, lose or draw, I'm delighted to be joined by Tony Haggerty, Haggerty10 on the X handle. Tony, how are you doing this evening?
I was all right up until about 20 minutes ago, half an hour ago, but hey, we'll get our teeth into that and talk about it in lines and detail in a second or so, yeah.
Listen, this could be the therapy session that everybody needs, right? We can all talk about it, get it all out, and then we'll all be feeling fine by the end of it.
It's a cathartic
Yes,
session,
absolutely.
isn't it?
It's a very cathartic session. Before we get started, as always, win, lose or draw, we're delighted that MPH Group have got our back with regard to a sponsorship. MPH Group they are Scotland's award-winning family-run all-trade specialists covering all of mainland Scotland. Winter's rolling in, and if you're looking at giving your home heating system a boost, then MPH has an enticing Navien Winter Boiler Promotion just for you. When you opt for a Navien boiler installation through MPH Boilers, not only are you choosing top-tier efficiency, but you're also getting a free Navien Internet Controller. This gadget can crank up your boiler's efficiency to an impressive 98%. The cherry on top is they're covering the first year's service with no added costs. Why Navien? Well, they're gunning for Product of the Year, the H&V News Awards, the Oscars of the heating world. To top it all off, the Navien ON range comes with an up to 12 years part and labour warranty. That's some serious peace of mind right there. A big shout out to MPH as they're also nominated for Small Company of the Year at the same awards. Excellence recognises excellence. MPH even offers flexible finance options, so gear up for the chill and consider making a smart move with MPH and Navien. If you are looking for plumbing, heating, kitchens or bathroom work, then look no further for MPH Group, and we thank them for their sponsorship as always. Once again, guys, before we kick things off and talk about tonight's result, if we could just direct everybody to the middle of the screen. You know, you can look at the bottom of the screen, but you can also look at the middle of the screen too. We're front and centre. We cannot continue to do these live videos after the game, before the game, and every morning without the help of you, the subscribers. So with that in mind, we've brought you our best Black Friday deal yet, the best deal in the Celtic Way's short history. For only £12, for the full year, for only a one-off payment of £12, you'll be getting the full year of quality Celtic coverage for less, which was this Black Friday. It was introduced on Friday and it'll be running until this Friday coming, so in a couple of days' time, that'll be running out. Please subscribe, as always. Your contributions are very much valued, and by doing so, you will get access to the instant analysis that Tony and I went through with regard to the game tonight. There's also scouting pieces on there. There's analytical pieces too. So anything that you're looking for with regard to Celtic-based journalistic content, please check a Celtic Way at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. £12 for a full year's worth of access at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Right, let's get into this game, shall we? And for 80 minutes, I actually thought it was going okay. But once again, it seems as if Groundhog Day has struck once again in the Champions League. And regardless of how competent, I'm going to say it wasn't a good performance from Celtic. I thought it was an average performance. They were competent up till about 80 minutes. Then, obviously, Lazio brought their star striker on. That's just the difference in quality that Lazio can bring off the bench. 2 goals in 3 minutes meant that Lazio got 6 points out of 6 against Celtic in the Champions League. Tony, what is your instant thoughts on the game so far? Now that you've probably had your emotional side to the game and you've thought about it and you've collected all your thoughts. What are your not so instant analysis, but maybe about half an hour, 40 minutes on from the game? What's your overriding feeling and emotion?
You said there Lazio took 6 points out of 6 from Celtic. That should be the other way about. Lazio are not a good team.
Yeah.
Celtic shot themselves in the foot in the summer. We spoke about it after the Feyenoord game when they said that they could have won that game as well, but they didn't recruit properly in the summer. You know, Brendan Rodgers was set up to fail despite the fact that a lot of gums were bumped about taking Celtic to the next stage in the Champions League. Celtic weren't prepared for the Champions League with the personnel that they had. Celtic brought on Mikey Johnson, they brought on Ciro Immobile, and what happens? Lo and behold, what did I say before? And I've said it countless times. Celtic don't lose one goal in the Champions League; they lose clusters. So even after they went one down, they just don't have it in them. They don't have no gumption to come back from setbacks like that, Ryan. You know, me and you were texting each other during the game. Kyogo's first chance that he chokes into the ground, that's a chance. That gets buried by top tier clubs. I don't care what MD says. He's got to do better. I actually thought Kyogo played well. It's in my instant analysis.
He's one of the better performers, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, this you could run this podcast into the 10 o'clock one in the morning, Ryan, and we'd still be talking continuously. Where do you start? I wrote a Champions League piece where I said it's becoming a chore and a bind to watch Celtic, particularly away from home in Europe, and it is. And then to compound it all, they cut back to the studio, and the lady presenter tells you that Celtic have made another piece of Champions League history by becoming the first British club to go 15 games without a win. You know, here's an open wound, throw salt in that and rub it in, and you just, it's staggering, it really is. You know, Champions League and European football something, when it rolls around every year, you look forward to, and it is the hope that kills you, but you're going in more in hope than expectation now, because you just know you never have a team that's prepared for it, and it falls squarely on those at the top. The board, big time. They can't wriggle off the hook on this one, Ryan, at all. They really have let the manager down by not parting, you know, with money, because the funds are there, and the fact is, Brendan Rodgers might now go in January and splash some cash and try and bed people in for, if they're fortunate enough to win the league again and get into the Champions League with 8 games next season. But that's something that you don't particularly want to think about at this moment in time. But, you know, we brought in a manager. They thought they'd done the job when they brought Brendan Rodgers back to the club. Forgot to arm him to the teeth, you know, and push the envelope as far as Celtic could push it in terms of their finances and get in quality players. The manager's buzzword since he walked in the door is quality, quality, quality. All he keeps saying, every press conference is loaded with quality players playing for other clubs. And I get that it's a hard sell to bring quality players to Celtic in the millions of pounds wage bracket. But Ryan, we were spending £6 million on players 20 years ago when Martin O'Neill was there. We should still be doing the same now. The £6, £7, £8 million bracket. I don't think that's out with the reach of Celtic's financial parameters to go and get players who will be the difference makers, who could have got you 6 points against Lazio. No, none. 6. Lazio were there for a taking. That's a team that finished second in Serie A last season. They're never a second team in Serie A, are they? Really?
Celtic have probably saved Maurizio Sarri's job as well.
Neil Lennon said they were
Ciro
very
Immobile's got as much to do with that as Celtic, I would say, because he did stand up and be counted for, but he'll smell the coffee with regards to that team that he's got. It's not a vintage Italian side. It's one of the poorer sides that Celtic have faced from Italy in years gone by. But I don't want to be accused. I agree. It's the truth.
It's one of the poorest sides Celtic have faced in Europe. Never mind from Italy. In
terms of Champions League, yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's be honest. And I say the same about Feyenoord, who were a pot 1 team. I wasn't too impressed with them in the home league, the home tie either. You know, so get back to it. We said after the Feyenoord game, 3 or 4 quality players in that Celtic starting 11, difference makers, could have won you that game. They could have won the 2 games against Lazio with the addition of that quality. And it falls back on the board not giving the manager what he wanted, but telling you they've got a healthy balance sheet after the horses bolted signing. I hate the word project players, but you can't escape it, can you? You know, a plethora of project £2-3 million players in the hope that you're going to flog them for massive profits. we'll flog that particular horse to death. But it shows when you go into the Champions League, and it shows especially when you incur suspensions and injuries. It's the same old story with Celtic, isn't it? Same old Celtic, always losing in Europe. And it's, it's, as I said there, it's actually becoming a bind and a chore, isn't it? It's not enjoyable. Because despite you sitting there thinking, we've done okay, we've contained them for 80 minutes, I was waiting for let's go and push and win it. And they seemed a bit tentative, and scared to lose it. And sure enough, Immobile comes on and they get the fortune with the deflection. But, it's... you make your own luck at times, but that came from Celtic losing the ball, didn't it? Again. Mm-hmm. And I texted you during the game and I was saying our ball retention at times, Ryan, was shocking. Absolutely shocking. And, you've got to help yourself in these situations. With played with two wingers who contributed the square root of nothing in that first half. Somebody needs to tell me what they did. And then Mikey Johnson comes on and people are saying, oh, he looked lively. Mikey Johnson just had to move because he moved quicker than Yang and Forrest all night. They were static, and
Yang, the only positive I can bring about Yang is the fact that he defended a couple of times as well. But then that's not his job. I know that Maeda does the same thing and he gets lauded for his efforts and going back and tracking back and being the main presser on the team. But in the moments it really counted for Yang. And I'm desperate for it to happen for him because I do think there's talent there and there's definitely a player in there to be nurtured. Yeah, I don't think he should be starting games at the moment, especially not in the Champions League against Lazio. As much as I was happy to see him on the team sheet to get that second chance after having an admittedly poor game against Motherwell, he didn't deliver once again. But let's be honest, if Abada was fit, Abada would be playing. And it would be Yang on the bench, and if Palma wasn't suspended, he would have been playing instead of Forrest. But those were the cards that Celtic had been dealt on the night or dealt before the night because of the way the injuries and the suspensions had went. They knew that was their bed and they had to lie in it. They'd made it with regard to those injuries and suspensions. It then is up to the players on the park. And James Forrest put in one good ball, I seem to remember in the first half. But it was a ball that O would get on the end of instead of Kyogo, who's 5'7", 5'8". I don't understand that. Why essentially surrender possession by putting that ball into the box when you know that Kyogo is not going to get that unless he leaps like a salmon out of the air.
Even Yang's decision making at that header, Ryan.
I've got to be honest. I want to see it again. I want to see it again, but it looked like a tight angle, and I thought he did the right thing at that point. I know I might be in the minority, and I need to see it again. But it's
only the right thing if he finds Kyogo with a header.
I thought he did. That's the thing. Did he not find Kyogo with that header?
No, Kyogo came running in, and he bulleted it too far in front of him, too far behind him.
I'd like to see how close he was to the post with regard to that.
You've got to. I just think you switch on. Go for a header at goal. If you miss, you miss. So be it. But
he's damned if he does.
He get caught in between two stools, right? Try and set him a partner, and I get that. But see, in that situation, you're chasing a goal to win. You bullet it towards a goal. Take your chance. You might get a lucky ricochet or whatever. It could go in fortuitously, or certainly try and get something targeted. Because Kyogo was coming in, he might have been able to profit from a rebound. But honestly, we've watched it so many times, haven't we? And you text me right after Immobile scored, and you went, "I'm sick of this." something like that. There was words to that effect. And
I'm bored of seeing the same story again. I'm one of these people that I can only watch a movie a couple of times because I know what the ending is going to be.
Yeah.
And you want something new, you want something fresh, you want to be kept guessing with regard to, I'm sorry to bring this example in with regard to movies and football, but it's the same movie on and on and on. It's like a repeat, It's like a video, it goes on and on every season. Yeah. But the buck stops with the board, in my opinion. I don't want to go too heavy because I know everybody else seems to be doing that. and quite rightly so, online, because they didn't do the business that was required. How many of Brendan Rodgers signings made that first 11 tonight? You look at Bernardo and Yang. I'm trying to think of anybody else if they made into it. Apart from that, no, it was just Bernardo and Yang. Now, in the summer is the period in which a team can improve ahead of the Champions League. If it wasn't, thank goodness Palmer came in at the end of the window, because that recruitment of players could have been even worse. Looking back on it, could you imagine not having Yang in that list of players? It would have been. I think it would have been challenging the 2020-21 season for how bad the recruitment was. They're not. It seems as if the higher ups at the club they're not learning from their past mistakes. They need to realise it has to be quality and not quantity. 2 or 3 players could really accelerate this team. 2 or 3 players could have won this game for Celtic tonight, and yet it's development players that are sinking rather than swimming at the highest level.
Of course, and on that, as you say, it's it'd be the usual. They'll learn from this European camp. They never seem to learn anything. No lessons are learned because they make the same mistakes continuously. Used to say, they'll show up the defence, and Near Beaton always ended up playing centre back for Champions League qualifiers, that kind of stuff.
At least we're past that stage.
Yeah, indeed. Lots of comments coming in. Doc 1967, Kyogo had a shocker from start to finish. How can you say he was one of our better players? I'll tell you why he's one of our better players, Doc. In my opinion, okay, you're entitled to your opinion, that's fair enough. But in my opinion, he had 2 shots at goal. One he choked into the ground, keeper made an easy save. Should have done better. Second one, he dragged it inches wide of target. He was still making those runs. He wasn't found. Alistair Johnson tried to find him at one point. It took desperate defending. He's in for a 1-on-1. But he was still making those runs. He was asked to make those runs. He was asked to hold the ball up. He was asked to be an out ball. And he was asked to be a target man. And he was doing it all himself. He did it with next to no support. And the times when Celtic did get involvements in goal, he was involved because they got bodies up to support them. You can only do so much without the ball. So that's why Kyogo was one of our better players tonight. And he's inches away from the opening goal. So you see he had a shocker. I disagree strongly, and that's why I disagree strongly. Granted, and I've written about Kyogo, I want him to be an out-and-out striker. I was pleased with the way he played tonight, and with a bit more support and a bit more quality players and the team supporting him, he would have scored the goal. And a bit more thought from Yang to pick him out with a header, if that's what he clearly wanted to do, but he get caught in 2 minds. I think he should have tried to bury the header, to be honest. But if you're going to set your teammate up, you set your teammate up, and he would have had a tap-in. But he was in there for the tap-in, and he couldn't be found by his teammate. So that's why Kyogo, in my opinion, was one of Celtic's better players. And you have your right to say that he had a shocker. I disagree. And I think, Ryan, you agree with...
That's why everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and it's good that we have different opinions, because I think that breeds healthy debate on the balance of the game and how the game went. For me personally, I thought Celtic's best player on the night was Paulo Bernardo, especially in the first half.
Yeah, the first half really
tired out in the second half, but he was playing, and I mentioned this in the instant analysis, that he was playing the Chris Commons role, in which he was winning good fouls in the first half, winning fouls, cutting up the game. There was a real good chance that he had where he beat a couple of players in the midfield and he was making that run. And then, as you talk about, the passing accuracy was off, and he passed it straight to a Lazio player. Lazio player couldn't believe his luck when he found that the guy that has waltzed through the midfield of his teammates has then decided to pass to him, one of the last lines of defence. It was quite an incredible moment, and not in a good way in terms of incredible. It was a real disappointment from a really, really good position from Paulo Bernardo, who did the hard part. He beat those men, and then he choked. He basically choked in that position.
Decision making, and just basic ball retention at that level. Well, Greg Taylor gave the ball away, I don't know how many times in the first half. Don't want to single him out, but he was giving the ball away cheaply. Alistair Johnson was at least looking up and trying to find Yang and trying to find Kyogo. you know.
What was that header all about in the second half?
You know, so I mean, you could pick a moment with every player tonight and say, what was that all about? You know, and yet for 80 minutes you were kind of containing them, weren't you? And but yeah, you're just bereft, you know, of ideas at this level. You also said that it was tailor made for Palma. It probably was.
It was that sort
Again,
of
tailor
tempo of
made,
game.
you know, yeah. But he stupidly got himself suspended, and you know, so yeah, these things can come back to bite you. But the biggest thing that's coming back to bite you is the fact that you just didn't prepare properly for another Champions League campaign. Get 1 point from 5 games. That tells you it all. How many goals have they conceded? 11? Is it? No, more than 11 now, isn't it?
They're on -11 on
Minus 11, sorry, yeah.
Raffles.
Yeah, so that's how they're the 11
-11 plus.
number strings. You know, so
It'll
you're
be
never
more than
giving,
11.
yeah, you're never giving yourself a chance to compete in these games, really, are you? And again, I go back to they can never lose one goal and kind of recover from the setback like that. They always kind of lose clusters, don't they? And it's always quickly. 2 goals in 3 minutes. Immobile scored. You know, Celtic players never do that, do they? In European level, don't see Celtic
Definitely
scoring.
not on European level, that's for sure.
You don't see Celtic players scoring or lethal strikers or Celtic scoring in
Me,
2 and 3 minutes. You know, that kind of thing. And honestly, I just, you said at the top of the programme, you know, you're just fed up seeing the same thing.
yeah, very, very much so. Groundhog Days we spoke about, but it definitely does seem to be the case in Europe with regard to Celtic and their European performances. But you can go back to and I will, as much as I want to sort of talk about the game tonight and not so much about the bigger picture, at the same time, Celtic are out of Europe now. That's it. The
That is the
game,
bigger picture.
yeah, that is. It's difficult not to talk about that because that is the prevailing fact of tonight's proceedings. Unfortunately, the fact is that the Feyenoord game is basically a glorified friendly now for Celtic. Feyenoord will probably have something to play for. Judging by what the result is tonight, it could only be Feyenoord. Well, it will only be Feyenoord that will have something to play for. So you don't know how that's going to end up. Celtic have got to show up. Be interesting to see if the fans show up for that one. To be honest, especially given the way that I know that the fans will show up because it's a Champions League night and you can't beat them at Celtic Park. But I do think that the supporters will be quite disgruntled about this one tonight, especially when they look at the 80 minutes. You know, Celtic had more possession of the ball. They had better passing accuracy. They had more passes than their opponents. Yes, Lazio had more shots and shots on target, but a lot of their shots, never mind the shots on target, a lot of their shots went wide of the mark. They were all speculative. They weren't challenging Joe Hart. Joe Hart hardly had a save to make tonight, apart from routine ones that were just went straight to him. There was nothing that you could say about Joe Hart's performance against it, to be honest, apart from perhaps his position could have been better for the first goal, but even then the deflection totally takes him into no man's land. The second goal is just a great finish from Ciro Immobile, as you would expect. He's been doing that for over a decade now, and we're kind of used to that sort of finish from a top class operator who could just come off the bench and decide a game just like that. But yeah, I'm just thinking back to the game. You're thinking to all the shots that Celtic had. Those 2 shots from Kyogo in particular really stand out. The shot from O not long after he came on, the chance from Yang, whether he should have played it back to Kyogo, which he did, or he tried to do that, and then or if he should have went for goal. I'll be interested to see that one again. Like I said, I've only seen it once, so you know I'll need to see the full optics of what was transpiring in that moment for Yang. But
he doesn't do anything with it, Ryan, either
no,
to play strike partner in or put a header on target. And I know the angle was tight, but he could still score from where he was with the head if you go in confident and just, you know, put the head on it and try and bury it. So, and he meant well with trying to set up Kyogo, but if that's the case, then got to execute it. Because chances like that don't come for Celtic, all the time. So you've got to be clinical in these moments, and Celtic just lack that too. And even Kyogo's shot that he dragged wider, it was a lot wider than I thought at first. I thought it was
It
inches.
looked really close the first time, yeah.
But, so I was a bit disappointed with that. But again, I thought Matt O'Reilly could maybe have released him a split second sooner.
He was my biggest disappointment tonight.
Yeah, so...
Because I think that's 2 games in a row he's really been anonymous. Count 3, if you talk about his so-so performance for Denmark against Northern Ireland. So, yeah, he needs to get out of this, this current dip in form. I don't want to call it a complete dip, just this current dip in form that he's got.
It's a wee rut, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Also,
but he was really poor tonight, and he was anonymous. In fact, no, he wasn't poor; he was anonymous, and I think that's worse for Matt O'Reilly, because if he's not contributing, then it means that the midfield is weaker as a result. I actually thought Callum McGregor had a better game tonight. He was one of the more positive players. He was trying to make things happen, but when you're doing the job of 2 or sometimes 3 midfielders, it can be difficult for the captain to make his mark in proceedings. But I just think for Matt O'Reilly, a player that we expect so much from, maybe sometimes even too much, we expect him to be the world beater every single game, and he's still learning his trade. He's still trying to get to the best version of himself. I thought he was poor again tonight.
Yeah, very much so. And as you see, he's in a kind of a form rut at the minute, isn't it? And he has to step out of that quite quickly. And here's hoping that he will. But it's, you're relying on guys like Matt O'Reilly to step up to the plate in these games. And, I get back to it. I mean, Lazio weren't any great shakes, well, let's be honest. And I was bitterly disappointed with them in terms of what they brought to the table. And you sit here thinking, they've taken 6 points from me. And it should be the other way around. And you just know that with a better quality of player, Celtic would have taken 6 points from them, because they weren't that very good. And so they weren't very good in that. Neil Lennon said in the studio he thought they were passive. I completely agreed. I thought Neil Lennon's assessment was actually spot on, to be fair to him. He was saying that Celtic have to get players in now to bed them in so that they can go and prepare themselves properly in the event that they bring these players in and they win the league and then go back into the Champions League. But that's something for the future. But I'm just bereft of excitement now in terms of the January window, because I genuinely thought Celtic could take that to a matchday 6 decider, and the chance was there for them to do it. And I just wanted them at one point to show real urgency and go and win that match, because it was there for the taking. And and we created some opportunities, but not really a clear-cut chance, did we? And a must-win match.
Which you can say is either a clear-cut one or not. It's up for debate.
But it's probably as good as you're going to get at this level, isn't it? Playing the way
I think the first one was bigger than the second one.
Yeah,
being honest,
too.
It was just the accuracy, and that's one of those ones that's going to be interesting to write about tomorrow in my stats bomb report that will be available on the Celtic Ways website. I think the XG, the post shot XG, will be down on that, because it was a good position, but it was the accuracy of the shot, or the effectiveness, or the way in which he took the shot, that made it such an easy save, because all the power was gone by the time it got to the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper could just easily pick it up. I think if it was against Celtic, you would be worrying about a chance like that coming Celtic's way, and you'd be delighted with the way that the striker has struck it in that point. If you're the opposition, obviously. But it was just it was poor from Kyo, and I know that he's feeding on scraps, but those scraps have got to count, and unfortunately they didn't on the night.
I think as well, it's the whole campaign has been a healthy dose of realism served up, isn't it? You know, if the board are happy with domestic dominance, fine, but we've spoken about this before. Brendan Rodgers' ambition, the players' ambition, your ambition, my ambition is to be much, much more than that. Want Celtic to be better in Europe. I hate the fact that these stats are trotted out. Well, it's 10 years since you last won a Champions League home group match. You know, that stat there at the end, that really was a kick in the Dennis Laws. And she's telling you, the presenter's telling you that you're going first British team to go 15 games without a win in the Champions League. You know, how about that for a kick in the guts?
I'm not overly surprised with these comments and these
You know,
in these statistics. Whenever I'm not saying that as a dig to the host, but I'm just due
I'm
to the
not
way
overly
Celtic
surprised
are,
by them.
I'm not
Either.
surprised that they're happening.
You know, so and you know, you just think to yourself, you know, what do the board want Celtic to be? Why are they not preparing Celtic to be the best version of themselves that they can be, both domestically and in Europe? Where did Celtic's history come from? The fact that they won the Cup with the Big Eels in '67. That's why they're a renowned name in Europe. But I mean, they're one of the few European Cup winners who have regressed terribly. I mean, it took them long enough to invest in a training ground after winning the European Cup back in '67. You know, a basic requirement like that. You know, elements like that, Ryan, just kind of show you about the kind of ambition that, you know, the custodians of the club have had for such a long, long time. And we have this argument or this discussion year in, year out when they fail on the European stage. It's not nice watching your club. I hate the fact that people probably laughing at Celtic right now and the kind of decline in standards in Europe. I hate it. I just because you care too much. You wouldn't do this for a living if you didn't care either. You know what I mean? But you have to address it. And Celtic have the realism slapped about their chops in this Group E campaign. Five games in, you know they're out. You know you look at the calibre of club they've lost to in Europe over recent times, and they're no great, are they? You can ring them off. They're not great, and you say to yourself, "Wait a minute," you know and I wrote it that they're a fallen European giant, and you know you have to say to the men at the top of the tree, what is your ambition for the club? Because if it doesn't match yours or I, then maybe it is time they got fresh blood and new ideas and got people in that care as much about what Celtic mean out with their own domestic dominance. Because we certainly care. We're hurting tonight, but I don't think the board are hurting like you and I. They'll say they will. They'll pay that lip service and platitudes, but it's all about dividends for them, isn't it? And having money in the bank for a rainy day, and you know.
That was one of the comments that annoyed me.
Yeah.
Got to be perfectly honest with you, when Peter Lawwell, it was after the financial report, was talking about we need to have a buffer in case we don't get into the Champions League one year. That just shouldn't be on the agenda whatsoever. Celtic as a club should be in the Champions League every season. I'm not saying I'm half been expecting and half not, but you know what I mean. You need to work for these things, but as things stand with the coefficient, if Celtic win the league, then they are straight into the Champions League group stages, which will be the Swiss model starting next year. The league is the bare minimum. And this is the thing. The league, I know the league is so important, but it is also the bare minimum for a season. In Celtic, it is the be all and end all. Or I can't contradict myself too much there. You know, it is the bread and butter, but it is the bare minimum. You want to see strides in Europe as well.
Didn't Peter Lawwell say last week? Yeah, didn't Peter Lawwell say last week that the ambition was always to win the title, get into the Champions League, and provide the manager with a world class team? Something along those lines?
Well, Brendan Rodgers has already made comments that are coming out now. He's saying that we need to add quality. That's the glaring thing that stands out really within this squad. Brendan Rodgers says it's vital he adds more genuine quality to his Celtic squad after being knocked out of European football for the season. It's basically cut and paste from whatever he said for the past 3-4 European games, honestly, or the losses that he's felt.
Cut and paste from what he said in the summer. He was talking about quality then, wasn't he? Quality, not quantity. And he's still saying the same things. And, you know, you do have to point the finger and say, you know, where are they going as a club? What is the ambition at Boardroom level? Because it certainly doesn't match Celtic supporters' ambition. I can't understand why Celtic cannot be a force both domestically and in Europe. And I know the argument about top players not wanting to come to play in Scotland. I get that. But I'm not saying you try and go out and sell and spend 12 million, 15 million pound on players. But you should be able to get decent players for 7-8 million pounds, Ryan, which are certainly within Celtic's financial parameters. And you don't have to go to top teams to get them, do you? I've said it a lot. I've said it a lot that why don't you target the teams that are 5th to 10th in like the major leagues, and then continue to go and get like maybe the top teams in the Danish league, Scandinavian leagues, Russian league, that kind of thing. Try and entice their top players, But from the leagues that are the main leagues, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, England. Yeah, maybe not so much England, but why don't you get the teams from 5th to 10th? I'm sure you can compile a list of players. You're talking about a goalkeeper, a left back, a striker. You can compile a list of lots of players from teams that are in that kind of Europa League, Europa Conference League bracket, can't you? From lots of leagues. I'm sure you can do that, and I'm sure there must be guys that can be brought in, in that 5, 6, 7 million pound difference makers. If you're doing it right, not have these projects foisted on you. Kevin was saying about the agency stuff and all that this morning, which was a valid point as well. And you take that on board.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about the project saying, the thing is, these players can still be long-term projects, but they accelerate the team and make it better in the process.
Yeah.
If you spend that bit more for these players who are guaranteed they're going to make you a profit in the years to come, but also make a difference straight away in the Champions League. You've got to speculate to accumulate with these players. If you spend £6-7 million on them, you're going to get a return on them if they're a half-decent player. Look at Edward. You sold him for you signed him for 9 million after a loan deal, admittedly, but you knew he was going to be a player. The only reason why Celtic didn't get a bigger fee for him was because they allowed his deal to go down to his last year, and his value had diminished by then. And they still get £14 million for him. The same roundabout for Christopher Ajer, who they would have got more for if they'd learned a lesson and not stockpiled players who didn't want to be at the club.
Yeah,
they've got to find that balance. If the Celtic board and Mark Lawwell, if they sign a player for 5, 6, 7 million who they know is going to improve the team straight away, but you can still sell him on and have a valuation for him in 2-3 years' time for maybe, right, so if you sign a player for 6 million and then you maybe sell them on for 20, 25, 30 million, that's speculating to accumulate, and you know that you've got these, and this isn't out with Celtic's financial capabilities. They've shown it before, their financial reports, that they're in a really, really healthy position. So something's got to change with Europe. This cannot continue to go on, this constant cycle of getting embarrassed every year in Europe or getting beaten against sides that Celtic should realistically get at least 4 points off of, such as Lazio. The 6-0 against Atletico Madrid. That can't be helped, especially with 10 men. It could maybe have been a wee bit lower, but the 10 men and you're at the Metropolitano with players that are on €100,000 a week, €200,000 a week, that can be difficult. But when you're coming up against a Lazio side that have been struggling, they get beat off the bottom side in Serie A at the weekend, then you've got to be doing better. I'm struggling to find excuses when I think all the damage was done in the summer.
You're underachieving. You're not being ambitious, and you are. I think the Celtic fans are more loyal than most, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And they've been strung along. They've been taken for a ride every other year by the board, who tell them every year at the AGM, they're going to be competitive, or they send the manager out with a message. Yep, the buzzword's Europe, but we need to take that next step. It's all. It turns out to be lies, because they don't back it up. As I said, Celtic manager Mark O'Neill 20 years ago was spending £6 million on players. John Hartson, Neil Lennon, Chris Sutton. And I get that. And hey presto, Celtic were competitive back then in Europe. They bought big guys that could play football, but what a match for most teams. But I'm talking about the financial thing there. So what's happened in the 20 years that we still can't go out and target that calibre of player for that type of money? So so it leads you to believe that there's a serious lack of ambition at the top of the Celtic tree, at the top of the hierarchy. Why is that? Why can't Celtic be a force in Europe? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. To Celtic's shame, Rangers have gotten to 2 European finals since Celtic were last in one. And I don't know about you, but that irks me, and it galls me, and it should irk every Celtic supporter. Because if Rangers can do it, then why can't Celtic? And you can say whatever you want to that, and they didn't win them, so be it. But they've still managed to do that, and I think that that's something that shouldn't sit well with anybody at the top of the tree at Celtic in that hierarchy. That your rivals have gone to 2 European finals since you last competed and won yourself. Since you last competed and won 2003, and that was your first in 33 years. So there is a serious and a chronic lack of ambition. If your yardstick or your parameters every year are just to stay ahead of Rangers, then to me, Ryan, that's not good enough. I want more, and I think every Celtic fan wants more. You can't just be keeping Rangers at arm's length and think you're a successful team. You've got to want to be better than that. You've got to be the best representation of yourself. And that means going into Europe, giving your manager the tools to do the job, and not feeling like you and I are right now, embarrassed by certain things about your club in Europe. And when stats like that, you're the first British team not to win 15 games in the spin in Europe. You have no answer to that, have you really?
Yeah, I know. It's just looking at the score in the other game tonight. Atletico Madrid are beating Feyenoord 1-0. So it would have been a perfect opportunity if Celtic had those quality players to get themselves right back into the group. With a final game, that Game 6 shootout against Feyenoord. Unfortunately, down to a bluntness up front and a naiveness at the back, you would say, with certain things too. They have cost themselves from that opportunity. But I think the damage was done earlier on in the group, to be perfectly honest. I don't that result against Lazio in particular in the reverse fixture was a real it was a real Groundhog Day moment, I would say, because we've felt that. We've covered that before, and we've felt that before when we're in the ground. That sort of event happening, Celtic doing so well, and then they get sucker punched right at the end because of maybe a mistake. But that mistake is bad enough, but at the same time, it's because of the ineffectiveness at the other end of the pitch with their striking options or their wing options. Celtic had Mikey Johnson and Yang Hyun Jun at the end of that game. Mikey Johnson wasn't quoted in an Ange Postecoglou side. He was put out on loan to Portugal because he wasn't deemed good enough for the Celtic side. Now he's getting called upon to make the difference in Europe a season after. I don't know about you, Tony, but it just seems like a bit of a sad indictment of the way the transfer policy has been, and I know that Palmer would have been there, and maybe it was Forrest that would come on for Palmer after 60, 70 minutes. But even still, the fact that, you've got Forrest coming on and trying to make, or Forrest starting games and trying to make an impact, it shows that squad depth is just not good enough for whatever reason. Injuries, I know injuries cannot be helped. I get that. But, the squad depth that you talk about just isn't there for Europe.
It's regression of the highest order. You look at that bench. Well, you look at the fact that Forrest started for a start. Been a great servant for us, but his time's up, isn't it? It's time that, to wind down your career at Celtic. It's just, it should not be starting a Champions League game, but needs must because of injuries to key personnel. I get that, right? And then you've got Mikey Johnson coming on, as you say, to try and be a difference maker, a guy that couldn't get a game under the previous manager. You've got Yang starting, who probably or arguably wouldn't start if some members of key personnel were in your squad. And then you look at the bench and you've got Morrison there and you've got Frame there, you've got Ralston there. So it's, Mikey Johnson himself, so try to tell me that's regression, isn't it? Surely. You're not progressing the club at all. You're not being as ambitious as you should be. And they're just, at this moment in time, Celtic are just not cut out for the Champions League because they're not giving themselves the chance to be a Champions League team. And every year you go in and hope and expectation. We're making predictions about how we think these games will go before the event, the pre-match. And you're full of enthusiasm and hope. And then, realism kicks in when you're watching these games and you just think, we're not at it here. We're not at the level required. And most of the players aren't at it. One or two exceptions if they turn up. But, you just have that deflated, scunnered feeling every time a Champions League game rolls along with Celtic. And we've seen it so many times. And not since, excuse me, the Martin O'Neill era have Celtic really prepared a manager to get into the Champions League. Gordon Strachan miraculously got Celtic into the group stages, out of the group stages of the Champions League to the last 16, playing guys like Paul Telfer and stuff like that.
That's the thing.
It's down to man management then, and but you're sprinkling of stardust there.
The board are still treating football as if it was as the same game as in 2006 and 2007, 2008. Yeah. The game has changed.
Of course.
The board needs to change along with it, and a lot of the same people that were there at that time are still in high positions at the club. There needs to be a freshening up, a changing of the guard, so to say, or a changing of ideas. If there's not going to be a changing of the guard, there needs to be a change of ideas. But people are too...
Sorry.
I think individuals are too comfortable in their position to change, which is why there probably needs to be a clear out. But that's probably a discussion for another day, in all honesty. What the fact of the matter is, Celtic won't be playing Champions League football or any European football after Christmas. It's now just the league and the Scottish Cup. They kick off their campaign against Bucky Thistle in January of 2024. Apart from the league, they get put out of the League Cup, and now they're fourth in their group, or last in their group, more like, in the Champions League. That out of those two competitions, and I know it's difficult in the Champions League, and you can blame the recruitment in that, but it just doesn't look that great. From you get put out in the first possible opportunity in the League Cup, you're the last team in the group. You get put out without even all the games being played. You're out of the competition after 5 games rather than 6, bringing it to the wire and then falling short. You've fallen short before everything's even been finalised. It's just not a great look, is it?
And there's no guarantee that Celtic are going to win the league in the Scottish Cup, Ryan.
No.
So, you're in a fight for both of those prizes, certainly. And, the optics don't look great when your men at the top are telling you, but we've got lots of money.
Mm-hmm. There's a comment coming up here.
Go on.
asking myself about running a PLC. I don't know about running a PLC, but it's not my job to run a PLC. It's my job to report on what's happening at the moment. And what is happening at the moment is Celtic are failing in Europe year upon year. So that's the failure of a business if they're not getting through in their competition and their objectives. Brendan Rodgers, in his first interview with the club, this is Celtic TV media, he was saying that he wants to make Celtic better in Europe. With one game left to go until the end of the group and no guarantees of Celtic getting a result in the final game, they're currently on 1 point. Celtic get 2 points in the Champions League last season. That'd be an even worse thing than last season. And you know, we were told that players would have been more used to the Champions League the second year round, and excuses like that and whatever. And I don't want to get into too many things, but it's been a failure. The Champions League has been a failure this season, regardless of good performances or good performances in games. It has been a failure. 1 point and out of Europe before Christmas has even arrived.
I think we're saying anything untoward about the bigger picture with the men at the top of the club, are we? Because it's not just this year. It's been a succession of failures. So and I think, quite frankly, a lot of Celtic supporters are sick of it, and but they're starting to see the kind of the malaise spread domestically as well. 3 games this
Remember
season.
that roller coaster I was saying? What's happening this season with the ups and downs?
Yeah.
It feels as if the roller coaster isn't going back up over the past couple of games. And it's up to Celtic to bring that back up the way, that ascendancy to happen once again, starting at St Johnstone. A team that Celtic dropped points to at the near enough the start of the season. But at the moment, it's a very, very disappointing place to be, you would say.
Yeah, and there's no escaping that, is there? That's the grim reality right now. There is no escaping that, and we come on, as we always do, after every defeat, win, lose or draw. We're always on here pre and post match, and especially post match, and we speak as honestly and fervently, as passionately, humorously as possible if it calls for it. But it's a crushing disappointment being put out of Europe. It's a feeling we've gotten used to, and I don't know about you, but I don't ever want to get used to it. I hate getting used to it and resigning myself to this foreboding sense of doom every time Celtic go into a Champions League group stage or enter a European platform, because they should be doing better. And I don't think it's remiss to remind those upstairs and the custodians of the club, as we like to call them, that they're not doing their job because they're not ambitious enough. They're not giving the manager the best possible chance to field a competitive team in that arena. So, and yeah, it's, the supporters will always back the team, they'll always back the manager, but there does become tipping points, don't they?
Yeah,
and I think there's a tipping point coming in terms of Celtic fans, in terms of their European record and their European the way they're viewed on the European stage. And right now, like it or not, we cannot escape it. Clubs, people, pundits, journalists, supporters of other clubs, they're laughing at Celtic in Europe because they just can't seem to get their act together at all. Yet the men at the top are saying, but we've got lots of money, rainy day money.
That's the galling part of it for me. That's the fact that I would be less annoyed if the money wasn't there and they were spending within their means and giving absolutely everything to the effort of trying to improve in the Champions League. It's the fact that as a PLC, they've got to release their financial reports as a public entity.
Yeah.
So they set themselves up due to the way that they're run, for the fact that people know the financials of the club. They know the money and the figures that the club are working with regard to transfers. They get £25 million for Jota. They've got all this money for getting into the Champions League, direct qualification to the Champions League, and yet at the end of the transfer window, they're scrambling about to make the numbers up. It's not ideal. And I think there's a couple of home truths that need to be heard. And I think they will be heard over the coming weeks by the Celtic support to certain elements. But it's the disappointment is very, very high tonight. But it's annoying because, for a large part of that, Celtic were in control of their own destiny in that game. But they didn't have the tools to go to that next level, to get that win away from home. Going back to the game for a second, I know this is a post-match reaction and we're talking about a more holistic view of things, but there was a point in the game where I think it was Celtic at a corner or two corners, and the Lazio fans started booing because they realised that the game was swinging in Celtic's direction and Celtic fans were cheering. That was the time to strike. That was the time to take something from the game. I seem to remember that corner. I think it hit off the first man and went out. It's these moments, Lazio could tell that they were in a game for a lot of moments in that game or in that match, and yet Celtic didn't have the quality to open them up. I think that just sums it up, to be honest.
CJ7, Celtic's jersey has shrunk to fit inferior players, unfortunately. And I remember once...
I think it has been for a while, to be honest. I think that saying is quite outdated in that regard because we have seen it shrinking quite a bit.
But I remember being on another podcast and I said, but Celtic Boardroom is also shrinking because it has inferior members on it. And I think that's a fair enough assessment. I said it back then, which was what, 3 years ago then? 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So Celtic Boardroom table shouldn't shrink to cater for inferior members. I think I was saying back then. And I see no change in that, to be honest. So it's there is a general malaise in terms of Europe and the ambition within the club. I don't know why that is, but there it is. But I stand by that. And as I say, nothing's changed. So talk about Celtic jersey shrinking for inferior players. We get all that famous quote by Jock Stein, but the Boardroom table should not shrink for inferior members either. And I think as we look at it now, I think Celtic supporters are pointing the finger at certain inferior members and the board. I think, in fact, I got it wrong because I think I was clipped up. I meant to say inferior, and I said the Celtic Boardroom table shouldn't shrink for interior members. And I think I was clipped up by
Dion Dublin got a job with the
Rangers podcast. Yeah. But that was a thrust of my argument.
I just want to bring up this comment, and I didn't mean it in terms of CJ7 being outdated. I was just meaning that quote in general is outdated tonight. And and that was in no way aimed at the person that was commented. It was just, I think just in general, we hear that quote quite a lot, but I just don't think it applies anymore because it has unfortunately happened. The unthinkable has happened in that regard. As much as I would like it to be the opposite, and I'd like Celtic to only have these top quality players, unfortunately on the park tonight, there was too many players that were just there to make up the numbers rather than make a big impact on proceedings in the game. James Forrest isn't a first team pick anymore, I don't think. You get players that are development players. Young's a development player. Get guys that are on loan that I don't even know if they're going to stay permanently. And Bernardo, I thought he was decent, but you don't know his long-term future. If I was David Turnbull, I would be absolutely raging at coming on at 87 minutes. 86, 87 minutes when the game is over, scored in 4 consecutive league games, and that's the amount of time that you're getting when you're coming onto the park. But I guess that's a debate for another day, and I realise that we have been on for nearly an hour talking about holistic views regarding the board and everything to do with Celtic. But there's some things that we can't change. Lazio 2, Celtic nothing, unfortunately. Is there any final thoughts you've got regarding the game or wider thoughts on what's transpired before we finish off this broadcast?
Do you know what? We've been speaking for an hour. I never actually thought we would go for an hour, but it's just well, it's probably gone longer, but yeah. But listen, I just think it all comes down to ambition, I guess, and transfer windows and not preparing yourself properly for, the Champions League is marketed as the best club tournament in the world. Celtic don't prepare for the best club tournament in the world, and they're repeat offenders at that, aren't they? Despite the fact that they reach it on the group stage, they've reached the group stage, in the past few years, and they've not had to qualify, but they're always underprepared for the greatest club competition on earth and end up a laughingstock, and it never sits well with me, my club being a laughingstock at any level of football. And
They were the butt of a joke tonight.
Yeah,
and that should be. Yeah. And I know that this board are reactive in what they do. They're reactive in most things that they do. They were reactive in bringing Brendan Rodgers to the club in the first place off the back of a defeat to Rangers in the Scottish Cup semi-final. They're reactive with the 10 in a row season. They made the changes after that. If they want to stop being the butt of a joke, then they need to be proactive in their things and make sure that the club isn't in this position to get these results. I can accept these results happening, but at the same time, when a failure to prepare means you're prepared to fail. It's one of the oldest cliches in the book. Talk about an outdated saying, but it's perfect.
But the Celtic supporters have had their fill of it, haven't they? Let's be honest, because it's the same story year in, year out, and we don't necessarily have all the answers, do we? And you seem to be on a hamster wheel when it comes to the Champions League. Basically, you just accept the fact that we're not good enough and say, we can't spend this amount of money on players. Yeah, I see clubs like Copenhagen beating Manchester United. I see Shakhtar beating Barcelona. Celtic just never ever seem to pull off any of these results at all. Just can't do it at all. And you're not unlucky that many times. You're just not good enough because you don't give your managers the chance to be the best version of yourself you can be when you go into a competition of that magnitude. And that's what's the galling thing, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's an apt way to finish this broadcast for today after an hour and 2 minutes. We thank absolutely everybody for joining us. I know it's difficult after the game to talk. Sometimes it's easier to talk after the defeat because you've got more to talk about, but I feel like this one has been a bit of an exhausting one because it is the hope that kills you at the end of the day. Celtic were in the game for about 80 minutes, but their bluntness in front of goal came back to haunt them at the other end of the park. Ciro Immobile scored a quick-fire double to ensure that Celtic would have no European football after the Feyenoord game early next month. That is the cards that Celtic have been dealt. They're going to have to play with them for the rest of the season, but big work is definitely due in January. Before we finish off, guys, if once again could we thank our sponsors at MPH Group and Navien Boilers. For all your plumbing, heating, kitchen and bathroom work, please check out MPH Group. They are Scotland's award-winning family-run all-trade specialists covering all of mainland Scotland. When you opt for a Navien boiler installation through MPH Boilers, not only are you choosing top-tier efficiency, you're also going to get a free Navien Internet Controller, which can crank up your boiler's efficiency to an impressive 98%, and they're covering the first year's service, no added costs. They even offer flexible finance options, so gear up for the chill and consider making a smart move with MPH and Navien. All the links are in the description, and we thank them once again for sponsoring our pre-post-match videos and our pre-recorded videos and our morning briefings too. For your plumbing, heating, kitchens and bathroom work, look no further than MPH Group. And It's still running until Friday, but you can get a year of the Celtic way from work from Tony and myself, including tonight's instant analysis, as well as analysis from Alan Morrison, Stuart Ross, and many more. There's also scouting pieces from Stuart Ross there, as well as opinion pieces from Tony and myself. When the situation allows, I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion over the next couple of days in the form of opinion pieces. So if you don't want to miss out on them, please visit www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. For £12, you can get 12 months unlimited access of quality Celtic coverage. It's been running since last Friday on Black Friday, and it'll be running it until this Friday. So please get involved. Please get subscribing. We cannot continue to do these free videos without the help of you guys, the subscribers. So please visit us at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe and get involved and get your Celtic fix. Tony, thank you very much once again for joining me this evening. It has been a long day discussing Celtic, but it's always worthwhile and it's always enjoyable spending it with you. So thank you very much for joining me.
Cheers, fella. Appreciate that. Oh, likewise, feelings mutual.
And thank you to everyone in the comments for getting involved. Once again, we apologise for not having too many of the comments up, but we'll have plenty of time for that tomorrow and over the next few days. We'll be back tomorrow round about 10ish to talk about last night's events, as well as some of Brendan Rodgers' comments, which we will endeavour to put on the website as soon as possible for you all. But until then, have a very good rest of your evening, guys, and we will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Cheers, guys.